In every place that I have lived, and I suspect in probably just about every village or town or city in our country and perhaps around the world, there is a place. And it is a place where in the mornings a group of people gather. And they gather there in hopes of being hired for daily work. I usually find that there are three main groups of people who gather there. It's usually men. Occasionally, some places women will gather there too, but it most often has been men. And there are three groups. One is that there's a group of folks who simply do not have ongoing employment. And this is the place where they go to get work, in the hopes that more days than not, they're able to be hired by someone to do work. The second is a group of folks who have regular, ongoing employment, but perhaps they're underemployed, or perhaps something has come up that requires additional income. So they go there in the hopes of making some extra money. And then the third group of folks tend to be folks who, for whatever reason, be it physical problems or whatever the reason, they simply cannot get and keep an ongoing job. So they go there along with the others in the hopes of being able to have daily work. Now think about that for a moment and have that in your mind as we encounter this gospel for today. Jesus' disciples have asked him, what does this new age that you're talking about? He sometimes calls it the kingdom of God or the kingdom of heaven. What does that entail, and who's going to be in it? Now, this isn't a new question. They had asked him this a while back, and he told them the story of trying to pass a camel through a needle's eye. In other words, it's not an easy thing to get into. But they've asked him now, who's going to be in this kingdom, in this new world order that you're calling into being as a Messiah? So he tells them a parable. Now, a parable is not simply a story. It's a literary genre that invites us in, and we're invited to be whichever character at any time we want to be. And there's usually a twist involved, and it usually really, there's a great lesson there. So Jesus uses them to teach. And he says, here's a parable of a man who owned a vineyard. And his harvest was coming in, and it was a heavy harvest. So he goes out, and he goes down to one of these places. And he walks up to the folks standing there, and he picks out a group of people, and he says, come work in my vineyard today, and I will pay you the daily wage. So they do. Now, we don't know what happened. I suspect he got there, and they started working, and he saw that his harvest was so much greater than he really anticipated. They would not be able to get the harvest in a timely manner. So he goes back. And he picks out another group of workers, and he says, come, I want you to work in my vineyard. And this time, he says to them, I will pay you what is right. He does this a couple of other times during the day, and each time he says to them the same thing, I will pay you what is right. And then finally he goes back at 5 o'clock. There's only an hour of work left, and he goes back, and here's a group of workers standing there, and he goes up to them, and he says, why are you here? Why have you been here all day? And they say, no one hired us. It wasn't their desire to be there. Their desire was to work. But no one hired them. And he says, okay, come. Come and work for me. So they get there. They get a good hour's work in. And it's time to end the day. So he tells his manager, let's pay these folks. And I want you to pay the one in reverse order. I want you to pay the ones who came the latest first, and the ones who came first last. So when they come up, these latecomers to the task, he does something, the manager does something that really irks me. And I bet it irks you. He pays them the full daily wage. Okay, now if I were one of the folks who came first thing in the morning, I'm going to look at that. And I'm going to see what this vineyard owner is doing, and I'm going to think in my mind, well, if he's giving them the daily wage, man, I'm going to get rich off of this. I'm going to get paid more. But each time a group comes forward, they each get paid the same amount. Now I have some sympathy for those who came early, because they really get ticked off at this guy. And they go, and as Matthew says, they grumble. I think that's probably pretty nice. An overly nice term. I imagine they were very clear with him. And you know, they were right. They were right, because what they did was not fair. It was not fair. And you and I know what's fair. We're taught very early in our lives that fairness is important. It's very important. It helps to keep folks happy. And folks should just be fair. And as we get older, we come to encounter the idea of justice. And we know that for a society to be successful in its functioning, it needs to be a just society. And getting paid fairly is part of that justice. So I get it. I get it. I understand. But then we go back to why Jesus taught this parable. Why he gave it to them. And then we have to encounter the reality that what he's talking about is what it means to live in God's reign. He's not telling us don't be fair. He's not telling us don't work for justice. But he's saying there's coming a time when living through me, that's not going to be the primary thing. That's kind of a scary sort of proposal to look at. You see, what this story, this parable is about, is it's about how God's grace is present in our lives, and even more as we grow in God. Notice something. In the first group of people, the vineyard keeper says to them, I will pay you the usual daily wage. Now, for you and me, that's a variable. That's a variable. You may get $100 a day. The person next to you, because of their qualifications, may get $500 a day. It's all a variable. But when he tells this parable, it's not a variable. The usual daily wage is exactly equivalent to what it takes for you and your family to live one day. It covers your rent. It covers your food. It covers your medicine. Whatever else you need. That's your usual daily wage. Well, you see what happens. You see with this what's going on. In the kingdom of God, we come to see more clearly that what we have has been given by God, and that God fulfills our deepest needs. That's what it means to be in the kingdom of God. It's not a place where, because of your ability to buy influence, as it was at that time, that you have a higher status. It is turned upside down, and we all come in at the same level. The first shall be last, and the last shall be first. It's all about our deepest needs in the eyes of God. So there you have it. There you have it, that God says to us, not don't do justice, not don't be fair, but trust that ultimately what you need, I will provide. Because to you and me, he says the very same thing that he said to each subsequent group of workers in the parable. I will do what is right.